The Wild took two humongous bites out of the Big Apple over the weekend. We recap wins over the Islanders and the Rangers and how this team continues to roll today on Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked on Wild your first listen every day. And just as a reminder, Locked on Wild is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we recap two big wins in the Big Apple as Alex Micheletti joins the show to talk about how the Wild were able to outlast the Rangers and the Islanders as we look ahead to the final game of the first half of the season. Talk about the goalie situation as well as two big performances by Cam Talbot and Kaapo Kahkonen also. My name is Seth Topal, host of Locked on Wild, veteran Minnesota sports content producer with a decade's worth of experience covering our favorite Minnesota sports teams, and now at the helm of Locked on Wild, joined by my usual Monday co-host, Alex Micheletti. And Alex, Wild love the Big Apple, it would appear, and it made for a fun sports weekend with the AFC and NFC championship games. All in all, it's fun to have a team that is winning just like the NFL teams that are at the pinnacle of their season too.
Yeah, I mean, especially the Rangers are a really good team. They're going to be major contenders in the Eastern Conference. So that was a major victory. And coming from behind and on a jersey retirement for one of the best players ever in the NHL and Henrik Lundqvist. And so that was impressive come from behind victory. And the Islanders made a really big push late there too. And so nice to get the sweep and 5-game winning streak. You can't top that right now. And you got Kevin Fiala. He has the longest point streak going in the NHL right now, and Matt Boldy 9 points in 9 games. So I mean, the boys are rolling.
The boys are buzzing. They finished the month of January 8-1-1. I did the math myself, outscoring opponents 44-28 in that stretch. And it's fitting in talking about the Rangers win to start. It's fitting that if you're going to go into an opponent's arena on a night where they're retiring one of the all-time greats jerseys in Henrik Lundqvist, fitting that a couple of former Rangers end up being the difference makers in that one, as Matt Zuccarello obviously heavily factored in the outcome, and Cam Talbot, back off of injury, stepped in and was just great. And, you talked about it. The Rangers are a very dangerous team, but fitting that two former Rangers end up being the deciding factors in the win.
Yeah, Zuccarello getting that one power play goal on his buddy, on his former team, and Lundqvist was on air for the Rangers broadcast and said, "Don't give that guy the puck," and then he scores, immediately. So that was funny, and Cam was brilliant down the stretch there. Got kind of ugly late with the New York Rangers fans throwing full beers on the ice. And it wasn't a goal. They reviewed it. So it was clearly, everybody looked at it, and, did not cross the line. And so, fun to see those former Rangers beat their former club. And, Kevin Fiala was brilliant in that game. He just continues his wonderful play with Matt Boldy. So much fun to watch. And, this team, continues to battle through adversity. Foligno getting hurt in that game and not being able to play tonight. And, Brandon Duhaime just steps up in his spot and it scores the first goal in the Islanders game. So just crazy.
Yeah, it's just, I saw it in some of Kaapo's some of his thoughts after the game, and we'll talk about that as we recap the Islanders game. But two of the big phrases for this team this year seem to be next man up and find a way. You talked about Kevin Fiala and Matt Boldy being just unbelievably good here over the last couple of weeks since Boldy stepped into the lineup. Freddy Gaudreau, that's a big key for this team, because we talk about a spot that the Wild can upgrade their lineup in the center for that line to try to make it as dynamic as the Kaprizov, Hartman, Zuccarello line is. If Gaudreau can give them anything offensively, that's going to only help that team because of what he can do on the defensive side of the puck as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, adversity for him against the Rangers too. Misses the misses the penalty shot, and then comes back and just snipes one for the game winner. That was impressive, and like you said, he's lights out defensively. Just needs to give a little bit more offense. But Boldy and Fiala are feeding off of each other, and sometimes you don't even need your center. You can you have your D guys out there too, but those two are just impressive, and it's fun to see Boldy on the power play too. He's just fit in there just so seamlessly, and given Fiala so much confidence too. Who would have ever thought Fiala would be having the longest point streak going in the NHL right now with all the superstars in the league?
Yeah, it's fascinating, because that's a huge topic as well that is going to be addressed later this week for Locked on Wild. If you have to make a decision between Matt Dumba and Kevin Fiala, who do you trade? And I have done a complete 180 in my thinking on the topic, just with how Fiala has played with Boldy here on this stretch. And, I would love to say if they have a way to keep both, they'll do it. And obviously that's the goal. But, man, that offense, when you have a couple of lines that you can count on scoring every single night, just makes it very dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, we saw it against Vegas last in the postseason. Their number one goal was to shut down Kaprizov, and they at times really did that and really frustrated him. And so you're going to need a second line to be there to step it up when when those guys go cold a little bit, Zuccarello and Hartman and Kaprizov. And so especially the way things are looking right now, it could be Vegas again that they play in the first round. So they're gonna, or at some point play Colorado, and so you're gonna need that second scoring line to definitely help. And that the Greenway, Eck, and Foligno line, you don't have to rely on them for scoring, but they're gonna grind teams down, and that's their role.
I did see some Rangers fans pointing out that, but we didn't have Adam Fox in the lineup. Well, the Wild were without, and obviously it's not to the same extent, they didn't have Nico Sturm or John Merrill, and they've played large stretches of games without the likes of Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Joel Eriksson, Cam Talbot. So miss me with we weren't at full strength, because they still had one of the best goalies in the NHL between the pipes in Igor Shesterkin, and Wild ended up getting the win. So
I mean, and Chris Kreider's got 30-plus goals. Mika Zibanejad, Jacob Trouba. I mean, the list goes on and on of really, the breadman, Artemi Panarin. So I mean, they are a talented squad without Adam Fox, and they had a 2-0 lead, at home. So no excuses for that.
Yeah, you didn't have to blow the 2-0 lead. They just chose to. So, all in all, a good start to the New York road trip. Welcome back, Jonas Brodin, by the way. He played 24 minutes, just like he always does.
Playing like a top 5 defenseman in the league. I've been saying that all season. So
unreal performance. Tell you what, let's dive a little deeper into the Islanders win, as the Wilds not only beat the Rangers, They also beat the Islanders on the New York road trip. We will talk about that plus more with Alex Micheletti coming up next here on Locked on Wild. It is 2022 and New Year's resolution time is in full swing. So if you're trying to eat a little healthier and get yourself into fighting shape, Built Bar is the best route to go. Built Bar is covered in 100% real chocolate and is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. I'm going to double down on that. It tastes better than a candy bar. Most Built Bars contain right around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. If you compare that to your favorite candy bar, you'll find that candy bars typically have 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. So if you are looking to try to stay out of the bad habit zone, grab your candy bar stash wherever it may be, in your house, in your car. Give them to somebody else. I'm not advocating throwing away candy. I can't advocate for that. But give those candy bar stashes to somebody else. Grab a Built Bar and put them in all of your favorite places, and you will never be disappointed. You can head to Built.com and use the promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your order right now. Use the promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Continuing today's episode of Locked on Wild, thank you once again to the listeners for helping us do it. Shattering records every month with this show. Had over 16,000 downloads for the month of January up to date. So, again, unbelievable stuff. We continue to chart upwards and upwards, getting towards that 20,000 mark. We're going to hit that this year. I guarantee it. So, always fun to see that, and always fun to see Minnesota get wins against New York teams because, well, it just doesn't happen. And so after the 3-2 win on Friday night over the Rangers, Wild followed that up with a 4-3 win over the New York Islanders. And Alex, it was pretty much the exact opposite script. Wild got off to a hot start, scored a couple of goals. The Islanders got it to within 2-1, but they could never get the equalizer goal as 2-1 went to 3-1. Then it was 3-2. Then it was 4-2. Then it was 4-3. And that was it. But, the Wild found a way to get it done without Marcus Foligno. And, if we want to talk about that point first and foremost, I saw people suggesting that it was kind of an ugly win for the Wild. And I will agree with that. But I think we saw a perfect example of what Marcus Foligno brings to this lineup when he is out there. Not only the scoring that he's brought this year, but just the presence. And it felt like his presence was definitely lacking, despite the Wild being able to get the win.
Yeah, he drives the bus to the team. He's the Energizer Bunny. The Islanders are a different type of team. They're not a very skilled team. I mean, they do have Matt Barzal, but a lot of their big guns are grinders. Brock Nelson isn't known as a skilled guy. He's more of a grinder, gets his goals out front, a la Zach Parise, who's on that team. Same thing with Anders Lee. I mean, he parks his rear end out front and gets a lot of greasy goals that way. And so, they just, Barry Trotz's teams, they play extremely defensively. And so, if you can get a good lead on them, it makes it very difficult for them to come back from. And, they almost pulled it off, but, Kaapo was brilliant there down the stretch, 40 saves. So, yeah, it was, we'll take the win for sure.
Yeah, and it was a flurry that he faced down the stretch. I mean, it's weird with just how bad the Islanders have been offensively.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird to see them put up a 40-shot night.
Right.
But they're
not known for that.
Given the Wild everything they could handle, and Kaapo just stood on his head and got the Wild that win. Yeah,
just impressive. He continues to step up when they need him, and he was good in stretches when Cam was hurt and had to carry the bacon. And again, the Wild tonight showed their depth from scoring from multiple lines scoring again, and some of the defenders chipping in for assists too, and Brodin played brilliantly. So overall, a really solid team win.
You talk about the depth scoring, and I know, it was on a deflection, but Kirill Kaprizov scored again, and it just bears. I said it in the recap of the game for the Locked On Now portion. It bears repeating Kirill Kaprizov's numbers over the last 20 games: 13 goals, 21 assists in his last 20 games. So he's got 34 points in his last 20 games. The Wild have outscored opponents 28-13 in 5-on-5 situations with him on the ice. I don't know if we even saw this type of level from him. I think we saw it in more concentrated portions last year, but it seems like he's getting even better than what he brought to the table last year.
Yeah, his vision tonight was incredible. The pass he made to Eck behind the net, it was a rocket pass to Eck, and Eck collected it. And I don't think Eck even wanted to shoot, but he got it by Sorokin, and power play assist for Kirill on that. But another 2 points. No sophomore slump at all. That chemistry that he has with Zuccarello is unmatched. You see how much fun they have on the ice and off the ice. You see that funny commercial that they just filmed and or whatever video content. Hartman's fit in well with those two, and he's so much fun to watch. And this team in the past was always accused as being the boring, the Minnesota Mild. And that's completely changed, and it's so much fun. He brings so much life to the team, and you see how excited guys are when they're out there with him. So he is the game changer.
Yeah, and next man up mentality. It doesn't hurt to have those guys at the top end, but I wanted to plug Brandon Duhaime too for slotting in. And this is an interesting kind of discussion point as well, because Jordan Greenway will be a restricted free agent at the end of this season, and he may be a player that is moved to try to alleviate some salary cap. If that is indeed the route that the Wild go, it seems like they've got a pretty logical successor in Brandon Duhaime to slot in and take over on that Eriksson Ek line, because you talk about a line that needs to be physical and kind of mix it up with people. He for sure does.
Yeah, he loves he loves creating contact out there, and he's not afraid to drop them if need be, and it's perfect. It's I always root for those college kids. He played at Providence, and so comes from Florida of all places, and he's fit in tremendously, and he can do it all. And that's the perfect guy you want on this team for sure.
Jonas Brodin, 27 minutes, 52 seconds of ice time in his second game back from injury. Welcome back. And
the Swedish Ryan Suter.
So there was one specific moment that I pulled from the game in watching Brodin, and it was the Islanders had a 2-on-1. And Brodin, I kind of had an idea who it was that broke it up. Then I saw the 25, and I'm like, Jonas Brodin just did it again. He might be one of the best players in the league at single-handedly breaking up opponents' 2-on-1s. And it's something that I've said a lot on this show. It's something that you don't pick up on unless you're really watching for it. Just criminally underrated defenseman that we've had a chance to watch over the last several years, and he seems like he just continues to do the same things on a nightly basis that we get to see, but nationally he doesn't get enough credit for.
Yeah, when you're When you're not the defenseman that's scoring a ton, it's tough to get that praise, and what he does, he's not necessarily known as an offensive defenseman, but he can control games on the defensive side too, and shutting down opponents, their top guns, and he continues to do that on a nice nightly basis, and it's amazing what this team did without him for that stretch of games. But when he's in there too, it takes pressure off the Wild to have to use that third pairing as much, and so especially when Jordy Benn's out there. So, yeah, it's nice to see how well he's playing. Spurgeon is just playing brilliantly, I think too, and Dumba's pitching in offensively when need be, and the D-corps helping the goaltenders out tremendously.
Brings us back to the two main points for the Wild the entire season. Next man up, find a way. So it was a fun weekend. One more game before the All-Star break for the Wild, but then a busy month of February, including, as I just found out in taking a look, the Wild have quite the interesting Canada road trip in late February. So what we'll do, we'll take a look at the February schedule, the additions that were made, and kind of what we think the Wilds will do in the month of February as they try to further solidify their playoff standings. Now third in the Central, back where they belong. So we'll finish up today's episode of Locked On Wild with Alex Micheletti after this. Final segment of today's episode of Locked On Wild. Again, thank you for making Locked On Wild your first listen every day. Seth Topol and Alex Micheletti hanging out here as we gaze ahead to the month of February. And Alex, here's what we've got. At Chicago on Wednesday, at Winnipeg on the 8th, home against Carolina on the 12th, home against Detroit on the 14th, at Winnipeg again on the 16th, home against Florida on the 18th, and then we get to the great Canada road trip at Edmonton on the 20th, at Ottawa on the 22nd, at Toronto on the 24th, at Calgary on the 26th. It's kind of daunting, but there are also several winnable games throughout that stretch that leads you to believe that the Wild could come close to what they did in January with a similar amount of games in February.
Yeah, the only tough ones that you mentioned in that stretch, Florida, who I think is the best team in the NHL right now, and Carolina, and Toronto. But I mean, everybody else they can really beat. They've put a beating on Winnipeg a couple times. That just seems like a team that they get fired up to play against, and same thing with Chicago, and some of those other teams aren't very good, and so they've proven that they can beat Edmonton too. So.
Yeah, and we'll get a chance, as we'll finish off with just some NHL headlines. We'll get a chance to see Evander Kane with the Edmonton Oilers. I was surprised, but also not surprised in the slightest that Evander Kane found his way back into the NHL. Is this going to be the move that gets Edmonton back on track, or is this going to be one that further breaks the car?
They played Montreal the first game, and so I'm not going to give anything, off that type of performance, even though he scored. Montreal's just a team in chaos right now, and they had a tough week. I mean, they got Zegras doing the Michigan on them too, and getting blown out by the Wild and Edmonton too. And you saw in that Edmonton game, Zach Cassian took out their goaltender, and no one stood up for the goaltender.
Yeah.
Jeff Petrie had to apologize after the game. It's like, you're not going to stand up for your goalie. I mean, that's a bad look on the leadership group. It's tough times in Montreal, and I bet they'll trade. I mean, they got a bunch of guys that would, any type of playoff type team would love to have a Mike Hoffman or a Tyler Toffoli, guys that can score and have proven it in this league. So that's a team that's going to be interesting to watch come trade deadline time.
Cole Caulfield,
Yep.
Nick Suzuki.
Yeah, Brendan Gallagher. I mean, some proven names. I don't know what went wrong with that team.
Get Suzuki and Caulfield to the Minnesota Wild and Rem Pitlick back. I know State of Hoppy would be banging the drum for that, so I'll plug out there. We'll also have the All-Star break, as mentioned, after the game against Chicago. And so it'll be a chance for Cam Talbot and Kirill Kaprizov. Unfortunately, Ryan Hartman did not get in, but always fun to just see the Minnesota players in the All-Star game kind of interact with the rest of the league. And this is just another opportunity for Kirill Kaprizov to put on a show in front of a national audience.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's in Vegas, so that adds to it. And, the 3-on-3 it's so fun to watch. And yeah, hopefully, the goaltending is, non-existent. So if Cam gives up a bunch, it doesn't really matter. But it'll be fun to see Kirill with some other guys that are non-teammates. And, the West, some of those guys are, Connor McDavid's, those types. It's fun to watch for sure.
If not for the Minnesota Wilds and their current hot streak, they would probably be the most talked about team in the Western Conference. But the Colorado Avalanche apparently are never going to lose a game again. They've won 10 in a row. They've won 18 straight at home. And you look at the standings in the West right now, they have 67 points. Nashville is next closest with 58, but 1 point ahead of the Wild. And the Wild have 5 games in hand on them. They also have 3 games in hand on the Avalanche. But Colorado just steamrolling teams in the West. Is that going to be the case the rest of the year, or are there going to be some teams that can actually catch them?
I don't think so. I mean, Cale Makar, I think he has 18 goals. It's for a defenseman, it's just outrageous. And they continue to they battle through adversity too. Nathan McKinnon gets hurt. He's been hurt a couple times. Landeskog's been hurt. Rantanen, same. So it's just they're a wagon. They that team has so much speed, and it's going to come down to Kemper in the playoffs. Grubauer couldn't do it, so they shipped him away, and so we'll see if Darcy Kemper's the missing piece. But they have everything else.
Yeah, and Grubauer not going to get a chance to try the playoffs for Seattle this year because they have not been great. But it is fun. I mean, you look at the West. The Wild have the second most goals in the West right now. They have the third most points in the Central, third most points in the West, and they've played they're tied for the fewest games in the Western Conference. So a chance for the Wild now that the regular schedule is done. February is going to be a big month for this team, but if they can continue to just next man up and find a way, I have a feeling this team could find themselves only trailing the Avalanche by the time the month of February is done. So we'll just have to wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's gonna be a fun stretch for sure.
Yes, it will. Well, I think that's a good spot to leave it here for today's episode of Locked On Wild. So now that your first listen of the day is done, make sure that you head over to Locked On Bets to get the lowdown on all of your favorite teams and how you can get your gambling on track. Locked On Bets is available on all podcast platforms, just like Locked On Wild. Make sure to follow us anywhere you listen to podcasts and everywhere you listen as well. You can follow us on social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. We keep you as up to date on Minnesota Wild happenings as possible because if a puck drops in the state of hockey, Locked On Wild is there to keep you covered with new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Podcast Network.